Judd, this is the UnLearn show. So we talk about breaking bad habits with a purpose. Thank you so
Very
much for
good.
being a guest with
Thank
us.
you for having me, guys.
Yeah, all of the creators here, the hosts, just this family of friends and LinkedIn, just compadres, if you will. We're
Yeah.
excited to have you. Do us a
Thank you.
favor, just a quick little bio of yourself. What should the listeners know about you? And then each of the co-hosts is going to take a minute to ask you a question, maybe a question or two. If we
Sure.
find a cool rabbit hole that we want to walk down, we may stay there. If not, we'll bring it back around. And then if we have time at the end, we would love to give you a few minutes to ask either each one of us or all of us just a question or two, because
Sure.
we like to flip the script on ourselves. So the floor is all yours.
I would love to. My gosh, my heart is beating so hard. Well, so my day job, I think I might have this on my LinkedIn profile. My day job is I am a surgical intraoperative neurophysiologist. And basically what that means is I work in brain, spine, and vascular procedures. And I go into surgery, anything that is in very close proximity to the nervous system. I have a laptop and I have some electrical hardware that I wire up the patient who is under anesthesia and, in a surgical case. And I basically monitor the nervous system. And as the surgeon potentially gets close to this, I have to relay this information back to the surgeon so we can keep the patient safe. So to do that properly, I have to be very fluent in what the surgical procedure is. And I also have to be fluent in everything that could potentially affect the surgery, such as like electrical noise or artifact or anesthesia, sedation. So there's never a dull moment on this job. It's always been interesting. It's been exciting. I've been doing it for 8 years. And I work for a great company. I've worked for several companies, but they've always been great companies. I've always been treated very well. And at the end of the day, the biggest reward is you get to keep the patient safe. I entered healthcare. I graduated as a chiropractor in 2007. I practiced for several years. And just as a, professional kind of turn of, twist of fate, I entered in this profession. And both professions, whether it's completely homeopathic, conservative care, or whether it's maximal surgical repair of somebody, both professions are very rewarding. The advantage of being in the surgical side of things is I kind of unknowingly entered a profession that I developed a huge respect for. And I grew up, my father was an orthopedic veterinary surgeon, and I always had a respect for surgical procedures. I didn't want to go down that road myself. I always wanted to kind of treat people more conservatively without medication. And, the alternative to that is I don't get a chance to see the maximal pain patients. You might see people up to maybe like a 5 or 6, but you don't see the people that are in traumatic car accidents or that have maybe a spinal fracture or, let's say, a brain tumor or something. So these are now cases that I have the privilege of being on and contributing information. So it's still a way that I can still be in healthcare and make my contribution and keep people safe. The night job, which is not every night because, it takes me forever to get a video posted. The night job is I've owned a digital media production company for about the past 15 years. And that is based around the Adobe platform of products, a lot of Photoshop and Premiere Pro and After Effects. And I started that company in 2003 as I was exiting my undergrad because I thought that long term I wanted to create some patient education videos someday for my chiropractic patients, mostly focused around either nutritional education or some type of like rehab exercises, something like that. Back when I started, my main format was basically DVD. And then over the years, I served as vice president of production for a media company in Atlanta, and our delivery system was narrowcasting directly into TVs. And now you have stuff like YouTube and Vimeo and LinkedIn and, all of you amazing content creators. And so, we continually push these boundaries, and you bring out everybody's best. I mean, the main point of that is it's still along the lines of education. I think educational type interviews really provide the best value to the viewer. And that's about it. So that's quick background.
I appreciate that. So Judd, and I think we're going to lead with Katie because she might have the most spottiest reception here in a second.
Okay.
If somebody were to jump into an elevator with you and
Yes.
say, Judd, in 3 sentences, what do you do? Because we all know you. We don't know what you do. But if I said,
Sure,
Judd, you only have 30 seconds to explain to somebody what you do. I don't care from a professional standpoint. What should people know about you in
I
30
think,
seconds?
geez, 30 seconds. My biggest thing is I think that I am a very creative individual. I like to think outside of the box. Jake is counting. I love to solve problems in literally whatever it is, whether it's structural or whether it's marketing, whether it's company management or something going on that I can solve and be a part of. Just saying, what about option A? What about option B, C, D, E, F? I am that guy, and literally, it's like the jack of all trades. It's what I love to do. I can't pick one thing. I like to do a lot of different things.
That's awesome. So the two things I guess that you just mentioned, like being having a production company, and then what you and your day job, of course,
Mhm.
in the medical field. I mean, they're starkly different. I mean, how did you, I guess, go down both of those paths, or what kind of like led you to both of them?
So I think the chicken or the egg story, which came first. I think to be honest with you, when I was growing up, having my father as a role model in, just a varied healthcare profession, I always had a passion for helping people. My father helped animals. I did not have that same love professionally for animals. I just wanted to help people. I love people. I love connecting with people. And I was enough of an athlete and I understood how the body worked that I felt that getting into a health field would be the most natural fit. Probably somewhere during my early teens, I was asked by an English teacher to create a music video. She was literally, I was so into science that she was trying to get me away from science and really expand my horizons a little bit. And she said, why don't you, in this year for the science fair, why don't you do a music video? And I was like, how is it going to count for a grade? And she said, well, it'll count as an English composition grade. I said, okay, I'll do it. So literally, like from that moment, I was hooked. 12 years old, 13, like I had VCRs like wired together. I was hitting play on one, record on the other one, stop on the other. Like you didn't have anything that we had these days.
I was going to ask, what year was that?
This is probably around like 1987.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Making videos at school.
Some of
nice.
Maybe you guys have been born, but maybe not all of you.
I didn't exist.
Yeah. And, it was like magic for me. Every time that I would see a TV production, I didn't really care about the show. I was more just fascinated with the equipment that went behind it, the lights, the camera setups, the tripod. And anytime I would go to the Buffalo Auditorium and I'd watch the Buffalo Sabres, I was more focused on the cameraman and everything that guy was doing to control the camera than I was on the game. It was so fat, and the lights around the auditorium, it was fascinating to me. So, in the mid 2000s, as I was finishing up my undergrad degree in exercise science, I just happened to venture onto Adobe.com, and I was like, this is incredible. This is the editing software that I had always been after. And literally, I can do this right in one computer. Like, I don't need to go to a TV station. I don't need a title generator. I don't need any special equipment. I can do it from inside of a computer. So I approached my department chair and I said, I would like to make a video for you, a promotional program from the student's perspective, highlighting our curriculum. And I will literally make this happen. The only thing that I did on my end was I had to get a fairly decent camera to shoot this. And then University of Buffalo kind of met me halfway with the cost on the Adobe. It was Adobe CS back then. And literally, like, I was graduating from my first healthcare degree the same time I was getting interested in video production. So they are completely unrelated. However, I saw a huge promise in the type of media that everybody is doing right now: educational content, personal branding, anything that you can basically do to educate your potential consumer or your potential client. This is stuff that I was doing back in 2003. The only thing is, I ended up doing commercial production for other companies along the way. And to be honest with you, I never really liked to get in front of the camera myself. It kind of scared me, quite a bit. I didn't like, public speech that well. And I was like, well, if I can get by making content for other companies, I'll do that for a long time. And that's how I got started in both professions right at the same time.
So Judd, I think a lot of people that know you as someone who's really generous. You're just like always out there doing stuff for people. Clearly your healthcare path, reflects that desire just to want to help people. And then, the video production stuff it's a version of it, right? It's you displaying others with your skill sets there. So you said you had a great dad as a role model. What else do you think made you want to like help people so much?
That's a great question. And to be honest with you, I can literally stick to my parents. I had amazing parents, but my father, when he was the owner of his practice, he had a huge veterinary practice in Orchard Park, New York. And literally anytime I knew of a family friend that had a dog or a cat or some kind of an animal that needed help, he would almost always do it for free. And he would do surgery or he would do some kind of care for free. And he always told me, literally, it was an ingrained message for me. He's like, money is the only replaceable thing that you have. But, to be able to help other people is something that not many people can do. And the way that I look at it is I have a day job that I can afford to get some really cool equipment as not just a hobby, but, as a profession. But I think it's absolutely magical when you take somebody and you can give them the gift of basically putting them on the big screen in some way, shape, or form. I think that when I was growing up, when I was in Boy Scouts and I would go back and I would look at some of the slideshows that my dad would put together for some of these court of honor meetings, when you hear the person in the audience look up at the screen and they say, oh my gosh, I was on the screen. Did you guys see me? Like, it's like a magical thing for somebody to see themselves in a big production. And number one, I think it's a gift to be able to give that to somebody. So for me, I was like, I have the money. I can buy the software that I need. I can buy the equipment that I need. The biggest thing for me is I would love to just help somebody. If they don't have the means of doing it for themselves, I will help produce the person and get them out there and get that message in a professional manner. And, the money is great, but to be honest with you, it's more about the person opening up a bunch of doors that they never thought existed. And that is extremely rewarding for me.
We love you for it, Judd.
I love you guys for the opportunity.
Oh my gosh, I hate to shift gears here a little bit, but I feel like I have to because you have so many sides to your story, Judd.
Okay.
And I want to highlight another piece of it. And that's, we know that, you know, the people who know you, who've had the pleasure of growing with you over the past few months, know you as having such a big heart. You know, you're the giver, you have that heart. So you also work in such a critical field doing what you do. And I don't know if this is too much, and you don't have to answer this if you're not comfortable, but we all grieve differently and we all have different challenges. But I really want to know how you manage those really hard days when have you lost a patient on the table? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So that's another great question. And the biggest thing is this, you know, before every surgery, we have to go in and we have to conduct a preoperative interview. And some of those cases where the person is relatively terminal, let's say like a GBM type of a brain tumor, and they know that this tumor removal is basically just done for palliative care. It's not going to increase the long-term outlook in their life. It's just going to increase maybe the quality. It might give them a little bit of time to say goodbye to a few more people. And you go in and you're interviewing the person, and you're asking them what their typical symptoms are, and they will tell you their symptoms, but they're not focused on themselves. They're focused on you, and they want to know that essentially everything is going to be okay, even though it's not going to be. And it breaks your heart, literally. You're looking back at this person and you feel obligated to be a pillar of strength for them. So, in front of the patient, you will be as compassionate as you can and show as much empathy and sympathy as you can to that patient and to the patient's family members. And maybe outside of the room, you might bawl your eyes out, you know, just thinking about the long-term fact that, you know, it might be a grandmother to somebody, or it might be a 20-year-old child to somebody, you know, and it's gut-wrenching to think about the fact that they might not be around in another 2 or 3 months. Um, I don't know if it ever gets easier. I'll say that the most difficult patients that we work on are pediatric patients because it reminds me of my own children. But I think that, you know, to be strong and to, you know, potentially grieve, I grieve just like everybody else does. You know, it's not a cold medical perception where I don't get attached to the patients. That you know doesn't happen. I can get attached to somebody very, very quickly. You know, if I walk into a room and somebody's very bright and bubbly, and I can see that they are well cared for by the people that are around them. They may have a lot of people in there. You know, it makes it all the more difficult. But nonetheless, you have to be strong for that person, and you have to be strong for the family members of that patient. And
So if you had, from your experience in dealing with these situations, if you had one piece of advice for somebody who may be going through a really hard time in a grieving process, what would you tell them?
Um, you know, that's hard to say because you're not necessarily. I'm not the one going through that. So anything that I could say is obviously much easier said than done for that person. Um, I have a lot of faith. I don't go to church very often, but I have a lot of faith. I don't push my faith on other people. I like it when the person that I am working with has faith because I feel that they can use that to kind of fall back on when everything else goes wrong. Think about your faith and reflect and just be calm and be at peace right now. What is going to happen will happen. The surgeons that I work with are absolutely amazing. They're very skilled. They work to the best of their ability on every single case. Every patient responds differently when they come out of procedures, and you know, it's just important that people have to gather the information before they go into these cases, and they say, this is the risk versus the reward. This is what the surgical team can do for me. And I'm going to take my chances and put my faith in them. I'm going to put my faith in God or whoever they believe in. And that's it. So I could tell somebody anything, very often they're still going to believe what they want to. So I can say, we will do our very best with you. You're in great hands. I just basically assure them that the people that are working on them are absolutely top notch. So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's good advice. I think lean into that crutch, lean into that comfort.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you've talked a lot about, or mentioned a couple times, that you had really amazing role models growing up.
Yes.
And you obviously have a very taxing job, and you have a lot of side things going on. But you also have a pretty big family that just grew by one fairly recently.
Yeah.
What do you think the hardest part of being a working parent is, and and ensuring that you're there to be that role model?
Okay. I'll answer this in two parts. Number one, it is when I'm gone, who does all of the caregiving? And number two, I don't know, maybe we'll address this in a couple different parts. So number one, when I'm away at work, which away for me is, maybe an hour to 3 hours away. It's not far. Sometimes I do some overnights, but my wife is a school teacher and she's off in the summertime, and she is with the two girls throughout the entire day. One is 3.5 months and one is 3.5 years. And when I come home at the end of the day, which is very often 10 o'clock at night, I feel bad for her. I feel bad for how much I know that the kids may have cried throughout the day, or how much she's tried to get the middle daughter potty trained, or maybe how many times she got spit up on. And it sometimes bothers me that I can't be there to help her. So, the other thing is I come home and I'm extremely exhausted at the end of the day. I usually get up at 5 a.m. and I get home, like I said, between 9 and sometimes midnight. So, I literally try my best to make up for whatever I can. It doesn't mean that much when it's the end of the day for her at 10 o'clock when everybody's sleeping when I walk in. So I do what I can for them. I forgot what the second part of the question was.
So you would say that that's the hardest part, is just like the time restraints?
Yeah. So the hardest part for me is literally looking at how much my wife has to do with the kids. That, like, to me, I can't do anything when I'm at work. That really is hard. The other thing is obviously, just being away from the kids on some long days, especially if there is like a last minute surgery add-on. And if one of my kids has something like a dance recital or a soccer practice, and if I miss that, it will literally send me through the roof, especially if it's a surprise and I don't have enough time to kind of give them fair warning that, daddy won't be there. That drives me absolutely crazy. I really like to be there for my kids. My parents were always there for my events. And so, yeah, that's about it.
It's such a hard dilemma, right? Like being in that position of wanting to be there for your kids all the time, but also having to make a living.
Very tough.
It's very tough.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Judd, this is the UnLearn show.
Yes.
We have to ask the question, what is one thing right now that you can share with the viewers that you are trying to unlearn, or that you've had to unlearn to get to who you are as a successful parent, successful professional, successful husband, whatever it may be? What is one thing, and it can be different for each one of them. What's one thing that you've had to unlearn that sticks out in your mind that you can share with our viewers?
Sure. I think one thing that I had to unlearn was that I went through a separation about 8 years ago, And I was extremely jaded after that was finished. I was essentially a single father, and I didn't know how I was going to basically come out of this whole entire situation. I didn't know if I was going to be able to remarry again. I didn't know if somebody would want to have a stepson in their life. And I didn't know if I was going to have any more kids. I literally, when I was going through that, it was such a challenging situation for me because it was probably one of the first times in my life where my vision was very unclear, and I had no outlook. I had no outlook professionally. I didn't know what I was going to do for income because I just had to relocate from Florida back to New York. And I grew up in a wonderful family. I grew up in a wonderful community, and I didn't think that anything like that was ever going to happen to me. And now all of a sudden I felt like this major outcast. And so for me, I had to really put aside a lot of bitterness and just aggravation and just edginess in my life. It was really, really difficult. Part of that was knowing that I could be loved again. My wife is absolutely incredible, and she takes care of me. She has taken my son under her wing like he is her own. She's absolutely wonderful with our girls, and she has a wonderful mother and sister that are just like my own family. So she has actually helped me with my communication style instead of being shut off, to actually open up and try and work on that so we can actually grow together. It takes time. It's taken years, and it's not always easy, but by far I know that she is my absolute strongest pillar of support. So I think my biggest thing is I had to unlearn anger. I had a lot of anger. The second way that I got over some of the anger, to be honest with you, was from many of the people on LinkedIn. And I look at that as a way to kind of learn, from a very large global group of professionals. And a lot of times when you grow up in a certain community, with or without the internet, I was born in the 70s, and you have sometimes tunnel vision of the people that are closest to you, and you only grow up with one ideology. And very often you don't understand how the world works. You don't understand the politics and which areas are suffering and which areas just might think a little bit different from you. So I think that connecting with a lot of people on LinkedIn has really opened my eyes. And it's also been an incredible way for me to say, you know what, my way is not the only way. There are so many different ways of doing things out there. And I feel like being on LinkedIn has just been another way of kind of toning things down for me a little bit, and, working on my level and depth of graciousness and how appreciative I am of other people, and the outgoing support constantly, from others. It's incredible. So,
and Judd, you're very even keel. Like, you look at this group of co-hosts that talk to you, and we've got our ups, we've got our downs, we've got our in-betweens. If I asked you, Judd, what makes you just angry, or what makes you sad, or makes you happy, like, if you have just in a sentence, if you could tell the viewers and us, what is something that just takes you to the highest high and the lowest low? If it's one thing that happened, if it's just something that just, I know something's popping into your mind because I see you smiling. So what is that just takes you to the extreme high and then the extreme low? What are those two things?
Two things in one word: my family. That's it. When everything is said and done, your job very often doesn't mean anything. Your income doesn't mean anything. You know, it really, what it boils down to is your family and the people that are around you. And often your family is also your friends. You can include your friends in that family too. You can be sick, you can be rich, you can be poor, you can be healthy, you can be wealthy, you can have every single thing in the world. But if you don't have a good support system around you, then life doesn't mean much, you know? So if something happens to my family or my friends, if I know somebody's sick, if I know somebody has a sick relative, if I know somebody has been into an accident, um, number one, I feel like I'm extremely empathetic, and whatever they're going through, I feel like I absorb those feelings very easily. I feel like if anything happens with my immediate family, like I was explaining with like a soccer game or with a dance recital or baseball game, if I miss some of those things, you know, if I don't get to spend the time with my family that I want or my friends, drives me through the roof. Same thing, my family brings me more joy than anything else possibly can. I can stare at my daughter Piper in her face, and when she's 3.5 months now, so she's literally all smiles. When she looks back at you and she smiles, and you know that you're the one that is making her so happy. I mean, there's nothing else in the world that will ever compete with that. No paycheck, no job, no car, no vacation spot. There's nothing that will ever compete with my family. You know, highs and lows, it falls back to them.
I love it. I love it. So, Judd, let me give all the co-hosts just an opportunity if they have any last questions or closing comments that they wanted to ask you. And if nobody says anything, we're just going to flip it to you. You've got the next 2 to 3 minutes to,
Okay.
if you have a general question or if you have a specific question for somebody, just give them 1 minute to everybody. Let's see if anybody pops on. All right, Judd, you have the next 2 or 3 minutes. If you've got a question, if you've got a general comment, if you've got anything that you'd like to share or ask any of us, the floor is all yours.
So I think that, you know, I'm extremely grateful for being on the show. So I just want to, you know, make sure that everybody knows how appreciative I am of being here. I think that you're doing a fantastic job with this show. We are all content creators, and we're essentially more or less doing this for free. So you are taking this show and you're creating a platform that educates others, and you're essentially doing it out of the kindness of your heart, you know. And you know, to be a part of the show and to kind of help others, that's an incredible thing. I would love to ask you how you prevent from getting burned out, maybe creatively speaking, or from just finding the time in the day to sit down and crank these videos out. I know firsthand how painstaking it is. It is a pain, but nonetheless, you guys have been doing this since I think like this past September. You've been interviewing, and you've, you know, week by week, every single time you sit down and you take the time to speak with people, and you know, it's your personal time away from your own families. And does anybody want to answer who like, do you have any motivating sources amongst any of you? I mean, do you kind of rally the troops? You're like, oh my gosh, now we have to do this Judd kid, and you know, who rallies you guys?
Do you mean collectively or like individually?
I mean,
like
individually or
how do we
collectively.
not?
Because you all are creating your own content in addition to this show. You all have your own businesses, more or less. Some of you have your own business and you're also employed, so you're stretched very thin. Who keeps either each of you going individually, or your entire team? Who would be like the biggest cheerleader?
You know what's hilarious is that I feel like with our dynamic, we're all cheerleaders. Like we all keep everybody's butts in line. No joke. Like there isn't just one person that's like, get on it, get on it, get on it. There's not just one ringleader. Everybody really helps. It's a family. It's crazy. That's so cheesy.
No, it's so true though, because like whenever, like when we know when someone is going through something, it's like, oh, that just means that like, okay, I need to take on more, I need to do more, or, you know, and like whatever, we just all sort of like chip in when we can. And then we also know that like life is life and everybody's going through stuff. And so when we do need to like pull back, it's okay, because we know that like we've been doing that for one of the other co-hosts, you know? So.
Yeah. Well, you guys do a great job. So I won't keep anybody any longer. I know everybody's in their own time zone and you guys want to get on with a Friday night. So thank you again. It was a wonderful time being here with everybody. And, you know, I hope we don't have to shoot this again because, you know, I don't want to bore you guys anymore, but thank you.
Oh my God.
No,
Stop it, John.
no.
Stop it.
I loved it. I loved it. Absolutely.
It was.
Big hearts.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you so much. Well, I'll see you guys soon.
we love you, Judd.
Love you guys so much.
Have a good night.
Thanks so much.
You
Appreciate
too.
it. Have a
Thanks.
wonderful evening.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.